All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the February 2023 5 Miles from Anywhere meeting. We are an international science society for the Baker Street regulars, and we meet the first Saturday of every month at exactly this time. It's been a great format, and we appreciate everyone coming. If you aren't here in person, we do have a YouTube channel where we do post the meetings afterwards. So let me just get the presentation going here. Okay, there we go. So I'm very, very excited to have two very good friends here today, Ross Davies and Nancy Holder, who will be presenting on the Terror of Blue John Gap website that is part of the Arthur Conan Doyle Society. And we'll have a good chunk of the time we'll be hearing from them, talking about the website, talking about the society, talking about whatever they feel like talking about, and you all will get a chance to chime in and ask them questions as well. So here's the agenda for today. I do want to start with a memory of Ron Lees, who was one of our 5 Miles members. He's no longer with us. Ron passed away earlier this month. He was a board member of my own group, Dr. Watson's Neglected Patients in Denver, Colorado. He worked on the Watsonian, and as you can see in this picture here, he was a friend of John Bennett Shaw's, and he would talk quite a bit about John if you asked him about it. I was really happy I got to spend time with him right before he passed, and his wife Mary, and I got to read him one of my own Sherlock Holmes stories. He's going to be greatly missed. He tried his best to always make these meetings. If there was ever any Zoom issues, it tended to be him. he would have a hard time with the Zoom, but he loved everything Sherlock Holmes. So we will miss you, Ron. All right, I do want to move on to brighter news because something very exciting here. Congratulations to Anna, and I was so excited that she could make the meeting today. I'm pleased to just say that she was awarded the 2023 Susan Z. Diamond Beacon Society Award, which recognizes a project that successfully introduced young people to Sherlock Holmes. And the Beacon Society has been around since 2004, and they're a wonderful organization. Their whole purpose is to get young people involved in Sherlock Holmes, and they give grants to teachers, to libraries. It's a wonderful organization. Anna received the award mainly for her work with the Keene, New Hampshire Sherlock Holmes Week, which she put on with the Monadnock Sherlockians. It was fantastic. Brian and I got to attend a lot of the events and even participate. And Brian actually acted in one of the plays, and I gave a talk there. It was just fantastic. And if you haven't met Anna, hopefully you can make it out to the BSI weekend next year, Anna. And a lot of you guys can meet her in person. She's dynamic, wonderful person. And the events were definitely for the young and young at heart. So everyone, a virtual round of applause for Anna for winning the Beacon Award.
Thank you, Derek.
Oh, you're welcome.
Kind words. And I just wanted to give it. Oh, wait, I don't think I have my camera on. Hold on. I just wanted to give a shout out about your article in our local Keene newspaper, okay, about your book and your story on that was created at the Keene Library, and then you further did it. The is it the Dragon's Teeth? I've forgotten the whole.
Yes.
Okay. The Adventures of the Dragon, yeah, which is a wonderful story, and in Steel True Blade Straight, wonderful anthology, and congratulations to you too.
Thank you, Anna. And I will. I think when I send my follow-up email, I'll send a link to the article so people can read it. But I wanted the spotlight on you right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Two other quick announcements. First, that there is going to be, we've done some Solar Ponds episodes here, and there's going to be a new Solar Ponds discussion group started by Jim MacArthur. He just announced it. It's going to be the first Thursday of the month starting in March. The format is not like this, though. It's kind of a cool format. It's just there's a Solar Ponds Facebook group, Solar Ponds fans, and I think it's the first Thursday in March at 8 p.m. Eastern time, he just starts a discussion thread and people participate that way. He wants to turn it into the first Prod Street Irregulars, or PSI sign-on society. And so he's looking for name ideas as well. If you're interested, you can go join the Solar Ponds fans Facebook group or just email me and I can get you involved, okay? And then the last announcement I have for today, author Tom Behrens, who is often on our group, but he had a book talk today, so he couldn't make it. He's looking for reviewers of his latest Sherlock Holmes book, 10 Steps from Baker Street. It's going to be released on March 1st. I actually think he's done a nice job. It's a nice cover there. And if you're interested and want an advanced copy, he'll send you like a PDF. And then when it goes live, you could just write a review for him. He'd appreciate it. So you can email him. I'll put all this information in our follow-up email. All right, any announcements I missed? Anybody want to announce anything right now? Feel free to unmute, and if you have an announcement, just go ahead and do it.
This is Steve. I would like to give two quick announcements. One of them is the Crew of the Barkland Stars meeting tomorrow. If anybody would like to come, I'll put my email in the chat and people can ask for the URL. Bob Steck, who I believe is a member of this society, will be our guest speaker and talking about how Sherlock Holmes did his observations, which I think will be really great. I'm hoping he wears his bunny outfit in memorial to Melinda Dillon, who passed away. And also, it's not too late to register for the second annual Legion of Zoom virtual conference, which will be Sunday, February 19th at 1 o'clock Central. We have 6 wonderful speakers internationally, from England and Canada and the United States. And we're also going to be doing a radio play that was specifically written for us by Kennarth Fox, who is an Australian playwright. So, and you can send me an email and I'll send you the link for registering for that too.
Thank you very much, Steve. Yeah, I definitely make that conference if you can. The last year's was excellent and it would be really good. Okay, not hearing any other announcements, we're going to get to the meat of today. So I'm very excited. As I said earlier, we have Nancy Holder and Ross Davies with us today to talk about the Terror of Blue John Gap website. Unfortunately, Margie Deck, who was going to be here as well, caught a cold, I believe it was, and now she's just not well enough to join us. So definitely want to give her a shout out because a lot of this was her work as well. So let me just, I'd like to just introduce them and then you all will have the floor. So Ross Davies, he operates a website featuring Sherlockian maps and toasts at rossdavies.org. He also edits the Baker Street Almanac, which the next issue should be coming out soon. And they always have a little section for us in there. He edits and then he heads the Sons of Copper Beaches and the ACD Society. I also want to add in that at heart, Ross is a big kid, okay? And he organized one of the coolest things at the ACD Awards at the Mysterious Bookshop in New York City this year. We had the running of the Wessex Cup. And as you can see, this is my race here with Charles Prepelec. You can see these little wind-up horses, and that was the race. We had these wonderful little wind-up horses going down the racetrack. It was recorded by Mark Jones, and believe it or not, somehow I won the Wessex Cup. But if you ever meet Ross, he's a ton of fun. He's just a wonderful gentleman. And I'm looking forward to seeing next year's race over that. Oh, it's a lot of fun. Nancy Holder is incredible. I don't know, there's no other word to describe Nancy Holder. Nancy Holder, she's a New York Times bestselling author. She's won the Bram Stoker's Award 5 or 6 times. I mean, you know, just amazing author. Has written some wonderful Sherlock Holmes stories, essays. I mean, I think you wrote like the Wonder Woman movie, like adaptation. I mean, that's crazy. She's a remarkable woman, and definitely just amazing. And one of the friendliest people ever. There we are drinking at the Ash Wednesday dinner at this particular week's BSI weekend. And even though she can't join us, I do want to give a shout out to Margie Deck. When I showed the Wessex Cup race through, that was for the Doylean Honor Society, the Doylean Honors, sorry, the awards. And Margie actually won for her story, Whitney's Reflection, which is this really wonderful Gothic horror piece that ties in with Doyle's horror writing. And you don't see a lot of pastiches of Doyle's non-Sherlock Holmes work. So definitely, if you get a chance, check it out. It's in Steel True Blade Straight, and it's a wonderful, wonderful piece. And I mean, she's done wonderful work in lots of other Sherlock Holmes essays. She did work for the Watsonian as well. So a big shout out to Margie Deck. All right, I think at this point, Ross and Nancy have the floor, and the format's going to be that Ross is going to give a little introduction and then going to kind of interview Nancy, ask your questions. But if you would like to kind of chime in and ask a question as we're going, go ahead and use the hand raising feature on Zoom, and either Ross will tell me to pause and I'll let you ask a question, or I might interrupt Ross and Nancy and just say, oh, we have a question from the audience. Okay. All right. All right, you two, you are on. And I'm going to go to the speaker gallery here. There we go.
Thank you, Derek. It's great to be here. And thank you for the chance to talk a bit about the Blue John Gap project. Let's start with a very quick description of the background of the project, and then hear from Nancy Holder, one of the 2 amazing people who are the creators and leaders of the project. A couple of years ago, the Green Bag Press, that's the nonprofit educational publisher that supports the ACD Society, was lucky enough to get permission from Dartmouth College, excuse me, to publish a treasure from the Dartmouth Rare Books collection. What treasure was that? It was the original handwritten manuscript of The Terror of Blue John Gap, one of Arthur Conan Doyle's finest horror stories, and indeed, one of the finest horror stories ever written by anyone. The ACD Society then did the 2 main things necessary to produce a first-rate manuscript edition. First, we made a super high-quality set of digital scans of the manuscript. Second, we recruited super high-quality editors to actually create the edition. Editors who could develop ideas for chapters. You know, commentary, analysis, pastiche, etc., etc. And then write some of those chapters themselves, then bring in other authors to write the rest, and then refine everything to make it educational and entertaining and a joy to read. We knew who we wanted as editors even before we got final clearance from Dartmouth to use the manuscript. We wanted Margie Deck and Nancy Holder. Then, when we invited them, to our great relief and joy, they agreed. Since then, Margie and Nancy have not slept, and they have done a fantastic job creating a truly, truly outstanding and unconventional manuscript edition of The Terror of Blue John Gap. Derek sent you a link to the project. Excuse me, Derek sent you a link to the project along with the invitation to this meeting, and I will put the link in the chat too. And now to the interesting part. Nancy's thoughts about the Blue John Gap project. I have a few questions of my own for Nancy, but you should feel free to chime in with your own questions at any time. We'd rather hear from you. So please just raise your little orange hand, and Nancy or I will call on you at an appropriate moment. Or as Derek said, if Nancy and I get carried away, he will interrupt us and say, hey, there are now 5 orange hands up. Give the other people a chance. But I'll get it started. Okay, Nancy, let's start at the start. How and why did you and Margie choose to take on this huge project in the first place?
Because you asked us to. How could we turn you down, Ross? Margie and I had already edited Sherlock Holmes of Baking Street together, and we realized how well we worked together. I live on the Olympic Peninsula, as does Margie, and we live about 2 hours away from each other. And we go to the same local Scion Sound of the Baskervilles. So that's how we met. But we've discovered we have so much in common. And we're two of those people where you say GMTA. I'll start one part of the sentence, she'll finish it, or we'll both have thought of somebody for the project. So we knew we were really well together. We're Sherlockians, but we're also Doyleans. So we're interested in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, not just as the creator and author of Sherlock Holmes, but of his other work, of which we were both somewhat ignorant before we became involved in Sherlock Holmes. But since I'm a writer and Margie is too, we were interested in him as a writer. And so finding out his other work and finding out about the Dartmouth manuscript was like gold. So how could we turn that down? It was just fascinating that we would get to do this. And so there was no way we could turn it down. That's my answer.
It does seem like a mighty good fit. And so the natural follow-on then is, so what is your editorial process? How do you two work together, both in terms of identifying authors and then in terms of working with them?
It's interesting because when we did Sherlock Holmes at Baking Street, we were much more strict about having a consistent house style. We wanted footnotes to be the same. We wanted was there a period after doctor? Are we using Canadian or British or English, American usage? And I have a copy editing certificate. So I was like on it to make sure everything was consistent and cohesive. And we were much more narrowly focused. When we're doing Blue John Gap, we try very hard to editorialize as little as possible on the people we choose to make comments, because we want to bring in all these different voices from all over, not just the usual suspects, not just the superstars of Sherlockiana. We want a lot of people to talk about Blue John Gap. We're going outside of the known universe of Sherlock Holmes people to get new voices of people who know something about something that's mentioned in the text. And so we try to first do no harm and to leave it alone as much as possible. And sometimes, honestly, for me, that's hard because I really want to move that comma, but it's their comma. So so that's kind of where we started out. The disparity is that we were much more, we had our hands on the reins of those horses in the Baking Street, but Blue John Gap, those are wild Mustangs. So we just try to let them have their head.
So this is a menagerie of authors, is what you're saying.
Correct. Menagerie, a stable of authors. Yes. Yes.
So, so where do you find these people?
Where I already prospected a long time. Well, I came into Sherlock Holmes from another universe. I'm a speculative fiction writer mostly. And I also taught in an MFA program forever. And so I either know or know of a lot of writers in different fields. And so also most popular fiction people or popular culture people, of which I say I am one, we're like magpies. We see something shiny and we really get involved and we love it. We love it for as long as we're interested in it. And so you take one thing from here and one thing from here and you put them together. So there's a lot of synthesizing. So my fun part is thinking of somebody we in Sherlock Holmes world or Doyle world wouldn't think of or wouldn't know about, and go to them and say, hey, you know about this topic. And I mentioned him before, but one of my former students who's now being very successful as a writer, his name is Peter Adrian Berevesh. He is Persian writer. And he wrote a little annotation about the 1001 Nights, because that's mentioned in Blue John Gap, and all kinds of interesting things about that. And, you know, a short but very content-rich piece about the Arabian Nights. And so little bits and pieces like that, I'll try to think, Margie knows people, I know people. So we try to think who would be unusual or who really knows about this, and we'd go to them.
So you're putting this out page by manuscript page. So you develop a set of accompanying works, and then we post the page, we post the transcription, and we post that set of works.
Correct.
One thing I've noticed over the last couple of iterations is that you're starting now to put in new material to old pages as you go along. Is that something that you think we're going to see more of as the project continues?
Most definitely. That's one of the joys of websites. I brought a sample of the actual hard copy newsletter. So this comes out, and then it's a discrete object. It's done, but the website can go on forever. And so one of the things we loved is, for example, is Derek had written a sequel to Blue John Gap, and the entire short story is available on the website. We couldn't have possibly put it on here, but we can put it on the website. And so we're going back and asking people, could you do an annotation about X or Y? And they'll, yes, but not now. Well, can you do it by July? Yes. Okay. Then we take it, we port it, we put it back, we put it into the website. And I will say right now, Margie and Ross are the website fixing dudes, because that is beyond my ken. I can't even see it. When Margie says, well, that's a left side comment, I'm like, okay, I believe you. And it's not until it's up on the website that I see, I just don't see it. I think I have like aphasia or something. But so tech props to you guys. But yeah, we can put stuff back. We can put new things in to previous pages anytime we want. And that is really awesome.
So how do you describe this story to authors when you approach them about writing for this?
Well, you know, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, as we know, invented a lot of forms. And he invented the serial short story with one main character or two. And we also feel that if he didn't invent, then he made concrete a lot of the tropes of different kinds of horror and supernatural fiction and adventure fiction. I think that this story straddles adventure fiction and supernatural or gothic fiction. I was actually doing a comic book, which has been put on hiatus, but it was 4 science fiction stories by women in the long 19th century. And I know this is going to probably be backwards, but it's called The Nightmare. And it's a novella that was written in 1917, or I would say The Nightmare. And it reminded me a lot in a lot of places of Blue John Gap, which was published 7 years before that. And so he was such an influential figure that I think people read him. I mean, I know people read him, but I think they took, whether or not they were aware of it, took ideas that he had made very popular and very approachable and used them in their work. So I think he continued to influence horror writers. I know he influenced H.P. Lovecraft, who in my world is a big guy. And so this Blue John Gap story is so bizarre and so scary. We have a couple quibbles with the way the hero went about his investigation, but that's part of the joy of it, is he's fallible. And so I think that he's just so influential, and that he had such an imagination. And if you look at his overall work, he did so many different kinds of stories. And Margie was mentioning one of her favorites is The Brazilian Cat. And it's like this in so many ways, because he's really, really good at building tension and really making you worry about the main character. So I think that's one of the gifts is he's very engaging. And so people engaged with him at that time, and we still engage, and writers are still engaging. So, I mean, look at Margie's honors that she's writing pastiches about his other work. So that's my answer, Ross. I'm not even sure what you asked me anymore. There it is, right there. So
the terror, and we don't need to give away the end of the story here to ask this, I don't think is, but the terror, if it were smaller, it's the kind of thing that would hide under my bed.
oh yeah, and it would wait for you to get out of bed.
Yeah. And
Maybe it would scratch on the bottom underneath your mattress, and just in case you were starting to fall aslep and not worry about it anymore. Then
it's a very disturbing story in the best way.
Yeah.
So how do you think this story, you've talked a little bit about this, but can you say more about how you think this story fits into the literature, both the Gothic, and the science fiction-y of the long 19th century? Because it's actually written at the end of that period. So is he tying some things together, or what? What's he doing here?
Well, I was listening to probably NPR, and they were talking about there's a certain little sort of a little piece of music called La Folia or La Folia. And through time, through centuries, musicians have riffed off it and made their own variation. It's kind of like, here's my La Folia. And people will go, well, that's pretty good. And I think that in a lot of ways that as he was coming at the end of a long Gothic streak, he was saying, here's my version. And people going, whoa, that's really good. So I think he was drawing a lot of threads from other people's work and kind of putting on his presentation piece. It's so well organized in the sense of the buildup of tension. And as many of you are writers, or we're all very close readers, after a while when you are a Sherlockian or a Ponsian or whatever you are, you kind of start to see how things are put together. You kind of step behind the curtain and you kind of figure out, oh, that's what he's doing. That's what he's doing as an author. And I think that when I step back and observe the way he wrote this story and the way he constructed it, it's like, ooh, you are on the money. And you can see that he knows what he's doing. And it's like at the end of the Olympics when they go like that after the gymnastics, he's like, here I am. And I think that is like, he's not mannered or he's not cautious the way some of the earlier work was. They're like, okay, I've got this castle and this evil baron and I'm trying to, okay, what'll I do next? He knows what he's doing. And I think that confidence and that sort of like building on what's come before really shows. And especially in this story, because the buildup of tension, as I say, is just, he really knew what he was doing. And it's really impressive. So I think it's a highlight. Like some people say, okay, what should I read if I want to start reading Sherlock Holmes? You say, oh, Speckled Band, read Speckled Band, or read Hound of the Baskervilles. Well, this is an excellent story to read if you want to start reading outside of that.
That makes good sense. Now, in fact, if we can take another arc or another kind of arc question here, over time he did a lot of things a number of things with scary animals, and it seems almost like there's an arc there too, right? There's the Brazilian cat, right? Then there's the King of the Foxes. Then there's the Hound of the Baskervilles. Is the terror the culmination of that arc as well?
Well, I had not thought of that, but that's a very good point. As some of you, I don't know if there are any petrels here today, stormy petrels, but I went to Victoria and there's a park. Hello. And hi, Craig. And they have a sort of it's kind of sad and prep you, it's sad, but it's a sort of a monument that there used to be a bear in this park, this famous park that I'm sure Craig can tell you the name of the park. Beacon Park, isn't it? It's a big park in Victoria, and you go there and you walk around and there's a little petting zoo, but there's also this sort of a memorial to a bear that had been captured and was kept in a little cage forever. And they said, we're not like that now. Now we are cool. We think of animals as with more empathy and as part of the universe and part of us, our world. But before, animals were very other. They were very not us. And, there were farm animals and there were weird animals, but they weren't anything to do with our ecosystem, as we say now. And so this othering of animals, I think, is one of the ways he used to make something spooky and scary. you know, we might use aliens or we might use vampires, but in these stories, he figured animals are scary. He's not very nice to dogs a lot of the time. So the fact that he used animals in creepy ways or to creep out people. I mean, it's pretty creepy to feed a poor little dying dog some poison to see if it works. So I think that I don't think it was unusual that he picked animals to write about, given the times and the way people thought about animals. But I had never thought of that, Ross, and that's why I love working with you, is that you have these interesting little side categories. I can see now somebody's going to have creepy Sir Arthur Conan Doyle animal stories. Any minute, there's going to be a book. So,
Yeah, I'm imagining I'm imagining Derek or Brian at their dining room table with all the little plastic creatures, and they're
exactly.
fighting each other, right? Like
And then-
Firefly, like Firefly.
Marlene will crochet some creepy animals just for them.
Oh, there you go. That'll do. Excuse me.
Could I ask a question? Hey, Nancy, I'm wondering if you could talk about some of the history behind this story, like what kind of led Doyle to craft this particular tale, because it does stand out as a little unusual for his work.
Well, if I had known there was going to be an essay question, I would have. No, I'm teasing you. I don't know, Derek. What do you think? It's 1910. And I'm sorry, but I'm a Mary Poppins person, and there's a whole thing about 1910, King Edward's on the throne. It's the age of men. That's in Mary Poppins. I don't know how to answer that, but if you have an opinion, I would love to hear it.
Well, I thought I had read that there was a place with that kind of blue.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Yes, definitely. There definitely is. And it's kind of funny because we're working right now. Mark Jones, this is what I love about working on things like this. Mark Jones sent Margie a book, and in the book they talk about the caverns around in Derbyshire and mention this and mention ours. And so we're all gung-ho about this, and we wrote somebody, would you like to write about this? And then he told us that this guy was going to have a British comedian was going to have a concert inside a cavern, and somebody fell and got hurt. So he had to call the concert off. It was in the Guardian. And so we want to post a link to it. How weird is that? And so all these kind of things that connect and are real can come out in the story. And it makes it even richer and more weird and more fun for us. And hopefully for the people who go to the website. That's the thing about anything you're truly interested in, is you keep moving out and all these little threads and finding out all this crazy stuff and telling other people about it. And so it's just like, it's almost like in the olden days when you had print a cartoon that was on, well, Jerry would know this, a cartoon or an illustration that was 2D. Now we can render it into 3D because of all these amazing little threads and anecdotes and bits of information that people bring. And I thought it was especially cool that Mark sent this to Margie. And I don't know how he did it living in the UK, because right now they're like on mail interdiction, but where there's a will, there's a way. But yes, there really is a Blue John Gap. And I didn't even know there was a real Blue John mineral, but Peter Blau, being a geologist, knew all about it and wrote us a very nice piece about it.
Could I ask a question as kind of a new member? And that is, how many people, I'm sorry, I had my hand up for a little while. How many people here have been to Blue John Gap? Anybody? Because when I went to England, and I've been a Sherlockian since the 70s, and I like my Conan Doyle, but I never read this story. We went to the mine. My wife, of course, said, oh, we're going to invest in a lot of these goodies. My son, John, by the way, said, okay, well, we're going to take you to the mine. Maybe I can show you a pendant of it.
Oh, cool.
I don't know if I can get it any closer, but you can see how pretty it is, and it kind of spins around. And the deal is, if you ever go there, you go through this big kind of a canyon. And as I was reading the story, because I have the Black Doctor book, I could remember all those places that we went, including the mine. I never knew the Romans started it. I figured a bunch of guys in that area found some blue stones and they wanted to have a good time. But if you have never been there, oh, you need to go, because it is just fabulous. And thank you.
That is great. So how long ago was this, in the 70s, you say?
No, it was maybe, gracious sakes, 10 years ago, maybe. At less than that, maybe, because I think it's still going. You can buy the Blue John anywhere. In fact, Castleton, Hope Valley sells a lot of Blue John, but we went right to the mines and went down a little bit into the mine and looked around. Of course, I wouldn't have gone into the mine if I had read the Conan Doyle story first. I would have stayed out and advised everybody to stay out. But yeah, no, it's still going, I'm sure.
Well, Robin Rowles, you have to start having tours there.
And Nancy, Margie, and I will want to know, did you take any photographs? Did you take any photographs?
Well, I didn't, except I think I still have a photograph somewhere of driving through the canyon, getting to Blue John. And I think my wife, her interest was not so much in Arthur Conan Doyle or the Blue John Gap, but the fact that she said, oh, you're going to go on this for the first time, you're going to go on a Zoom meeting. Let me get out my Blue John for you and we can show it to everybody. But it's a real place. And I think Conan Doyle, what's so wonderful about him, he writes about real places if you can kind of discover it. And if you've been there, then you go, oh yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I can remember that. And he puts you right into it. So if I can find pictures, I'll post it sometime.
Thank you.
Certainly. Let me go back on mute and let you folks continue this wonderful discussion.
Well, you know, that brings up a point that there are sort of sets of things that authors write about. And there's a famous story called "O Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad" by M.R. James. And it's about a Roman ruin and things that happened at the Roman ruin. And this guy goes to the ruin. So all over Britain, all over England, there are these Roman ruins that figure into people's stories. And once you start seeing that, I mean, there could be a book of Roman ruin creepy stories. But there's sort of, that's like that La Follea thing I was talking about, like, here's my version, well, here's my version. And so it's so neat to have it kind of solidified and made real that there really is a Blue John Gap, and we know somebody who really went to it. That is really nifty.
Yes, and for the rest of you, we did not stage this with Walter. This is a complete surprise and thrill to us.
Yes, but in the chat, I did mention to him we would be sending him $20. So we'll write that off as a business expense.
So Nancy,
Yes.
Are there other questions before I ask another question? Please feel free. Okay, I'll ask another one. What's in the works?
Well, we've just been sending out our little tentacles and asking for input and asking for page 4. Woohoo! And we've got some pretty good people, no, some excellent people, I should say. We're pretty sure of some of our excellent people. Other people are going, I think I can make your deadline. I will say that one of the things that's coming up that I'm excited about is that we're going to have somebody talking about, well, I can say this, Peter Cannon, who's revered as noticing the influences of Arthur Conan Doyle and H.P. Lovecraft. He's written a lot about this, and he gave a wonderful presentation to the Sydney Passengers for one of their anniversary celebration conferences. He's going to write a bit about that. And then in another page, following page, somebody I've worked with before, S.T. Joshi, who is a huge H.P. Lovecraft and weird fiction person, is going to contextualize where this stands in terms of weird fiction. And he's doing a new book about the weird fiction of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle for a publication, for a press called Centipede. So we're really excited about this sort of I wouldn't say a detour, but an enrichment of how this fits into the world, as you were asking me earlier, the wider world of supernatural, gothic, horror, whatever you want to call it, weird, off the track kind of fiction that he was so good at. So we're really excited about that.
This is, hearing you talk about it this way, Nancy, makes me think, does anyone here ever played the Kevin Bacon game?
I have. Yeah.
It's the it's the degrees of association game, right? And I'm thinking that by the time you and Margie finish this project, people will be playing the Blue John Gap game, because you'll be able to get to anyone in the world of weird detective, crime, geological fiction or literature just by going to the Blue John Gap page, because everyone is going to be there.
Okay, well, now I have a challenge. We have to get Kevin Bacon to make an annotation for us.
That is a great idea. I don't know him, but my understanding is he's actually a very clever person, isn't he?
Yeah, well, and now he's in a great commercial that we'll probably always, we watch football. The only thing we watch live is football, and we see a Kevin Bacon commercial now. So I'm sure we'll get to him somehow.
Yes, that's right. You're a Seattle Seahawks.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah, I sure am.
You're one of those loud people. Yes.
I am. Our neighbors heard us yelling one day.
So one of the things that has not yet and may someday be, right, particularly if it turns out that the Taylor family has photographs, for example, one of the things about the Blue John Gap website at the moment is that the imagery it has is the images of the pages of the manuscript, right, as you are making your first run at each page.
Right.
Do we know anything about the history of the art that illustrates this?
Well, there is art that illustrates this. And Stephen King made a comment in one of his early, it's kind of like How to Write Horror, My Thoughts of Horror. It's called Dance Macabre. And he said that describing the monster or the creature or the weirdness in a story kind of deflates it sometimes, because if it turns out that it was a 10-foot tall praying mantis, you think, the reader, oh, I thought it was a 50-foot tall praying mantis. And so there's usually some disappointment. So in one of the pictures, I think it might have been, I'm maybe hallucinating, but I think there was a picture that was included in the beginning of this talk, but it's a very famous one. It's like the Hardcastle, the narrator, is confronting the monster, and it looks kind of like a giant bear. Mark Jones says it's a bear. I say he's wrong. So once the monster is conceptualized, I think it's a little, to me, I kind of wish they hadn't done it. I can see why they did it, but the art of it, I think, kind of destroys some of the ability of the reader to make up their own version. I have a whole theory about what it is, but I don't want to tell you because it's too early. But I did just read, and God knows where I read it, because I'm sure everybody else has 6 or 7 Sherlockian journals and newsletters they get every week. But there was an article about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle being miffed because there was I think must have been a Gerard story. But anyway, there's a picture of Napoleon dead. And he's like, the big gotcha is that Napoleon dies, and you put a picture of it on the first page, so you gave away my whole short story idea here. And he was really, thank you. And so I feel that kind of that way about the art. I love the pen and ink pictures of him, going into the cavern, and he's all nervous. But once they showed a monster, I'm like, I kind of wish you hadn't done that. But it is very penny dreadful, So I can see that the sensation novel that, sensation short stories supposed to raise the hair on the back of your head and all that. I can see why they did it. So
your thinking on the art then is illustrations that raise the tension are good.
right. I wish
But
they had
illustrations that resolve the tension should never be done.
exactly. Well, not never. No, never. Well, hardly
Oh,
ever.
hardly ever. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, but I could see why they did it, and it's interesting because luckily for us, it's something to show. Yay! but it's not what I see when I think of the Terror of Blue John Gap. I see something weirder. So
yes, there's also one that from a 1923 edition that makes the terror look a little bit like an angry bunny rabbit with round ears. So it's also possible to have just unfortunate art. Right?
Well, there's the Donnie Darko connection, so it's all there.
Ooh, it's Fred.
Hey, can I ask another question?
Of course.
So you're putting together this website, and it's great. I mean, it's amazing, and you're going to keep going. I'm just wondering, where do you see the end? Because it sounds like this is multiple years. And then any thoughts on when you're done, putting together maybe a manuscript edition of the story with the essays and stories and everything from the website and annotations kind of in a print edition?
Why, Derek Belanger, publishing guy. That's a very good idea. And in fact, we've sort of decided we should maybe work a few pages ahead and not actually do the 7-year stint that we assumed it would take. I hope I'm alive at the end of this, but we have thought about moving forward a little faster and getting more pages done and inventorying them, even though they're not on the website, and perhaps with the intention of doing that, one says a little bit coyly. So that's an idea, Derek, that I think is worth exploring.
Yeah, it's a sort of following on what Nancy's talking about here, and this is me observing from outside what we call within the organization Team Terror, which is Margie and Nancy, that this is one of those projects where when you start it, it seems really good, but it might turn out to not take off. This one, we all have projects that work and we have projects that don't, and that's the nature of the creative and the publishing process. And this one seems to have taken off. And so, once something like this takes off, it is going to attract more talent. It's going to attract more interest, and it's going to be possible to do what it sounds like you and Margie are doing, which is build an inventory, build a queue, build a flow of this so that it's not scrabbling along 1 year at a time. It's
right.
And you feel like it's going that way?
Yes, we do. And also the nice thing is now that we have the website up and pages up and people are getting the hard copy newsletter, more people are, it doesn't take as much front loading to explain what it is. It's the Blue John Gap. Oh, I've heard of that. Whereas before it's like, what are you doing? And what? And we have a little bit of a swimming upstream at first because the manuscript series by the BSI Press is very much preserving the integrity of the manuscript. And they'll say like, well, in the version that was printed in the United States, this word is 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes. In this one in yellow face, it's 2 minutes in the British version. So, very much of annotating the manuscript itself. And we're more of a popular culture approach. We do want to keep track of the oddnesses of the fair copy. One is coming up, but he repeats part of page 4 on page 5, which caused us some consternation at first, but we decided it was actually a feature, not a bug. And so in that way, we don't have to explain. It's not like the manuscript series per se. It's this thing. He wrote this story. Now more people are going, oh, yes, I've heard of it. Yes, I've heard of it. So it's easier to jump to the chase for the asking. Would you please contribute something? And people are less like, okay, when is this coming out? Is it really going to come out? You know, and so that is more of a known quantity now. And so that has really helped because people go, oh yeah, sure. So-and-so told me about it, or I saw it last month. And so it's easier to get people to agree to do it, frankly. So yeah, I think that it makes it easier to inventory.
It makes sense. And so clearly, Derek, this project is going on. We could talk about it for hours. We could talk about it for years, but I think we're out of time, right? Is it time to hand the microphone back to you?
Yeah, we're pretty close to out of time. Does anybody have any last questions for Nancy or Ross before we wrap up? I think at this point, you could probably just unmute and ask. Oh, Shayna?
Hi, I mean, this is kind of a general question for everyone here, really. This is the first time I've read the story. Was anyone else surprised that there's no actual supernatural element at play in this narrative? So I just kind of assumed going in, and then the fact that, you know, people, there was like so much disbelief in his face and so much skepticism. And ultimately, it just turns out it's basically like a bit of cryptozoology. It's a previously unknown animal, like a cave-dwelling creature that has not been, you know, recognized taxonomically. Yeah. And it's like, well, I mean, that doesn't seem all that implausible. I mean, I guess maybe people living in England, like they'd expect that sort of thing to happen, you know, somewhere else, not, you know, here in, you know, the old country. But yeah, was anyone else surprised that, you know, the monster's just basically like an albino cave bear?
But I disagree with you. I don't think it is. So
well, I mean, not literally, but, you know, it's an animal. It's not, you know, a preternatural thing, apparently. Although the fact that he thinks he shot it and there's no sign of blood, so maybe there's a little wiggle room.
I don't know. But that's why I like it. It's open to interpretation, but you guys can answer that.
Because you mentioned Lovecraft, and like certainly during the early parts of the story, I was very strongly reminded of Lovecraft. Things like the rats in the walls, the idea of an outsider, and there's this, you know, local legend and this, you know, legacy of fear, and then there's like a Roman, you know, excavation.
Well, one of the things, maybe I shouldn't say this because it's kind of giving away the store, but one of the things we have discussed, and I'm tempted to imitate Margie's lovely Texas accent, but I won't, is if this thing sneaks out every once in a while to eat a sheep and it's gigantic and enormous, how has it lived all this time? And we have a theory that it's eating fish or but if it's as huge as it's purported to be, how is it surviving? And when they block I'm not going to give you the ending, but but anyway, there are things that don't mesh with science, but also what we loved was that is Victorian science. And so how the Victorians looked at science and how we look at science and natural science and all those things was different back then. And so I want to give away too much, but I'm not sure it's just a big weird cryptozoological thing. But that's your thing.
There's one detail that I also found intriguing: the fact that this narrative is addressed to someone, and there's a note in the back saying that, you know, your initial reaction is why I never said anything more about it. And the fact that whoever's presenting this manuscript to us is like, yeah, we don't know who this person is that this letter's addressed to. You know, it's this weird, unresolved little extra mysterious detail that adds to the atmosphere.
I love it because there's so much unresolved stuff in it that makes it, to me, that's what puts it in weird fiction. It's like it remains weird. It remains like, ooh. You don't go, oh good, it was a 10-foot praying mantis, okay, and they fixed it and they killed it, all right, we're good. And it doesn't go that way. It doesn't go that way at all. And one of the reasons I like that so much is it reminds me of one of my favorite books, which is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. That's not resolved either. And so it's that, is it? And I love that, huh? And I love that he could do that and make it stick, because I still think of it that way, like, well, I'm not sure. And I like that uncertainty because it keeps it in your head. It's still living in my head. And that's one of the wonderful things that he's done Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, because Sherlock Holmes lives in our heads too, all the time. I mean, he's just there all the time. And he does that with his weird short fiction as well, his non-Sherlockian fiction. And that's why we celebrate the Blue John Gap story. Is really masterpiece.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. Brian, did you want to chime in with something quick? Okay. All right, then. I want to thank, again, Ross and Nancy for spending an hour of their Saturday with us. So round of applause, virtual applause to our presenters today. And next month, we're going to have former sheriff and law enforcement expert, John Wesley Anderson, who was part of the John Benet Ramsey investigation out in Colorado, who also wrote a Sherlock Holmes book called Sherlock Holmes in Little London, because Colorado Springs was originally called Little London and was designed after London. And the whole thing ties in with Holmes coming to Colorado Springs. And that's a big part, and that's where his investigation, most of the book takes place. So really looking forward to having him on next month. And I look forward to seeing many of you here again. And thank you all. And I'll see you in March. Take care, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.